FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome, and you are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's Tuesday, May 8th, 2018. Well, we talk a lot about financial markets. We talk a lot about precious metals. One thing we don't talk about much is technology and its inexorable path forward and what effect that has on you as a worker, as an employee, as a business owner. But first, as always, join the conversation. You know, you make my day when I see your email in my mailbox, my inbox in the morning, and I look at them first thing when I'm drinking my double tall breve latte. And if you never had that drink, you should try it. It's really good. Look it up. See what breve means in Italian. Anyways, the email address is kl@kerrylutz.com. So what is an unskilled or even a skilled person to do with looming technological change on a massive scale, such that we've never seen before? Well, Alasdair MacLeod is with us, our good friend, who is in charge of research for goldmoney.com. And you just recently wrote an article about AI, Alasdair. Welcome back to the show.
Oh, that's very much my pleasure, Kerry.
So we're in the midst of this AI revolution, whether it's so-called self-driving autonomous vehicles, whether it's AI in people who have jobs like a mortgage analyst, underwriter, or a securities analyst. It looks like their jobs are, over the next decade or two, probably going to cease to exist. What is an upwardly mobile member of the working class supposed to do about this, Alasdair?
Well, the answer to this one is the same as the answer, I think, to every technological change we have had since the Industrial Revolution. And that is that not only are existing jobs replaced, but they are replaced with new opportunities. And the problem, I think, that governments really have with this is they can't see where the new opportunities are going to come from. So rather like the Reverend Malthus, they sit there thinking, oh, it's going to be the end of the world. But actually, it never turns out that way. Before we went on air, I was telling you the story of the number of people who are employed in London merely shoveling horse manure off the streets. And then the motor car came along. They were all out of a job. But guess what? They got jobs. And the blacksmiths and all the rest of it got jobs as motor mechanics or whatever. When your existing line of business effectively makes you redundant, you go and find something else. And I see no difference with this time compared with every other technological revolution we have seen in the past.
Well, Alasdair, you know, those guys who were shoveling the horse manure, they got jobs as car dealers afterwards because they were so expert in slinging the you-know-what that they were a natural for it. But you seem to say it's not a zero-sum game. I mean, I agree with you. Look at the Luddites in UK and London. Back in the 1800s, they were smashing the looms because they believed that was going to be the end of textile employment, and they couldn't have been more wrong. But what's to make you think that maybe this time really isn't different?
Well, there have been so many, if you like, revolutions in technology. As you rightly point out, going back to the days of the loom, and before then, I mean, you had canals, putting horses and the coach out of employment, and then you had the railways putting the canal men out of employment. I mean, this is a feature of, if you like, progress. Technology progresses us. If technology does not progress us as a race, then we do not take it up. It's actually as simple as that. And the problem, I think, with this question always is that the only people who know how to employ redundant people, if you like, are the entrepreneurs. These are the people who are always the forward thinkers, who put their skin in the game, put their money on the nail in order to produce something new. And I'll give you a very good example. Going all the way back to the 18th century, late 18th century, coal was shipped down from Newcastle. And the coal fields in the northeast of England produced coal for London over a long period of time, 150 years, maybe more. And the result was that, it gave rise to the saying that there's no point in shipping coals to Newcastle, because that's where the coal came from.
Right.
It was the one big industry. The coal industry was closed down effectively under Margaret Thatcher. And as a result, there were large numbers of unemployed people in that area. And what happened was that Nissan Motor, the Japanese company, decided that they would build a plant there. Why did they build the plant there? Because they saw there was labor available. And the Nissan plant in Tyneside is widely acknowledged as the most efficient car manufacturing plant in the whole of Europe, bar none. And it is just amazing. So, how many of those coal miners would have thought that they would be in the business of, working these high-tech robots, making cars, using a lot of AI, by the way. None of them would have thought this was possible, but it's happened. And so, one thing creates another. And I think this is the truism behind Say's law, and that is that production begets consumption. You can't have production which isn't consumed. I mean, there may be leads and lags, but basically the two things do balance out. And this is why the only way in which AI would be if you like, the only way it would expand in an economy is if it progresses the economy. If it equals progress, then people will take it up. And I think it's also worth saying at this juncture that all artificial intelligence so far is aimed at, if you like, in a narrow sense, towards one specific thing. So you can have, for example, airlines will price their tickets on the basis of the inputs that come in. If you go back to the late 1980s, banks started using AI to try and predict stock prices. And, to an extent, it's been successful. But what it has not done, and this is a fascinating thing, is artificial intelligence has not replaced human intelligence. It's just that in these specific cases, it does it better than humans. And so if it does something better than humans, then a business will benefit from it, and it will end up creating employment elsewhere. So all in all, it's AI is acting in the narrow sense. It is doing specific jobs. And one of the points which I address in my article is that AI in the general sense, I don't think would ever work, for the very simple reason that in the general sense, artificial intelligence takes inputs and produces a single output, either yes or no, either deal or not deal. And but humans have multiple choices. And not only that, they're irrational. And they might even switch the machine off.
So obviously you met my ex-wife.
Well, I couldn't possibly comment. I mean, I was asked about this at a dinner, I think about a year ago. And it just occurred to me that, with all these motor cars, automobiles, becoming completely automatic, driverless or not requiring the input of a driver, I sort of thought, okay, I hang on to my nice sports car. And if the roads all get chopped up with these, new cars, as it were, which are all on autopilot, then if the AI that really does work, then the answer is I can just drive through it and they'll just get out of the way. So philosophically, if you think that one through, you can see that AI will never, ever replace the human intellect. So I think that was a very important point to make. So what we are actually talking about is not AI in the general sense, but we're talking about AI for very specific functions. And those specific functions, there are so many of them. I think we would all be surprised if we sat down and started working out how far AI is already intruded into our lives. I think it is enormous. I think it's already there. We don't realize it. Companies are using it internally to do things, to produce a service for us, or whether it's goods for us, whatever. So we don't actually see the AI. We do come across it, obviously, on the internet when we decide to go and buy something from Amazon, etc. So yes, we do see it, but there's a lot there which we don't see, and it is a major, major industry. It is too late to stop it, and actually, we have to embrace it.
Well, we can't stop it. That's obvious. A trend in motion stays in motion, and the government will only make things worse by suppressing it. But you see it just in your traffic lights driving down the road. All of those lights are controlled by a computer using algorithms, and the latest ones are using AI. And although in Florida, the artificial intelligence doesn't seem to be much smarter than the native intelligence that was out there, the innate intelligence, they really got to make it better. Because if it's just imitating human thought, does that really help us in the long run?
Well, I think it's a very interesting point, because just imagine one of your busy junctions in Florida. If you put a point policeman on to direct the traffic, how it would snarl up in about 3 minutes.
Yeah,
and there'd be queues all around Miami.
My father used to say those cops weren't there to direct traffic; they were there to obstruct it.
Very often, it works like that. But I mean, in the old days, a good traffic cop, on traffic duty, would get the traffic flowing because he knew the junction. He'd learned the weight of traffic at different times on that junction. But now, of course, that is effectively replicated by artificial intelligence, it doesn't work totally every time, but it's a lot better. And I think the proof of it is that if you went back to the days of putting a traffic cop on junction duty, you would find that the whole thing would foul up in 3 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it just reminds me, growing up, we had this traffic cop, on the corner of the main drag. Of course, there was a light there, but they don't trust the lights. And he would be like putting on a show. He would like make these exaggerated hand motions. He was retired and they had to give him something to do. And he'd like escort people, he'd bow to them. And I mean, he was a one man. Watching him, he was so funny. It was one of the things I remember from my childhood. But unfortunately, nowadays, the only place where they really prefer human police over traffic lights is Greenwich, Connecticut, where they have 2 or 3 cops stationed throughout the day, and all they do is direct traffic and stand in a round circle in an intersection and yell at people and tell them to go and not go. Oh, it's just a nightmare. And hey, the idea of AI with having all the cars, then we won't need any traffic lights except for those late adapters who basically are going to be squeezed out anyway. The whole thing is rapidly changing, but the number of drivers in the U.S., I think I read there's 11 million of them between personal drivers, taxi cab, Uber, and truck drivers. I mean, that is a large number of people. It's the largest profession in the country. It's a lot of people to displace even over the next 10, 20 years. So according to Say's theory and yours, those guys are going to be finding something that they like doing better and that they're better at, et cetera. I'm not convinced, Alasdair, but the proof will be upon us soon.
Well, on that particular subject of automated motor vehicles, if you like, they have actually just introduced a new regulation in this country, and that is that a person in an automated car has to, if you like, touch the steering wheel at least once a minute. Mm-hmm. I was interested because my son has just bought a brand new top of the range Volvo. It's a hybrid thing, and that has got I mean, it's got so much electronics on it. It's just amazing. And it'll you set it to drive along the motorway and it'll keep you in the lane. And, you don't need to touch anything. But what it does is, at least once a minute, it asks to be reassured that you're still there. So you have to touch the wheel, as it were. Which is great. And I don't see that drivers are necessarily going to disappear from motor vehicles directly as a result of this AI that's being applied. I think there's still going to have to be a human being in charge. Governments will pretty well insist on it. But having said that, in time, I think people will find other things to do. And, if you want to make something new or provide a new service, you've got to find people to do it. So, if a driver shows that he's got the intelligence and the intellect, if you like, and also perhaps the necessary characteristics required to be employed by you, then you'll employ him. So actually, these changes happen, and it's all part of progress.
Yes, they do. You can't stop. You can't stand in the way of change, and you can't really even manage it. Every time the government tries to do that, we have nightmarish consequences. But look, Alasdair, so people who used to work on auto assembly lines, there's a lot less of them because the machines do so much more work. A lot of them were older, middle class people whose auto worker job had really catapulted them into maybe even almost the upper middle class, gave them security, and now those jobs are disappearing. What has replaced it that's so much better? I mean, what are they doing? I mean, are we going to have a world full of YouTubers, podcasters, and I don't know what else? I mean, is that what we're heading for?
I think the problem with this one, Kerry, is the problem actually that everybody has with it. And that is nobody knows where these guys are going to go. But that's the point about change. They find something. And they always have in the past, and they always will in the future. It is the nature of an economy. And you're right to mention the government, because when the government starts to get involved, basically they gum everything up. And this has got an interesting angle in the European Union, because the European Union does not like progress. It doesn't understand it.
No.
It likes things as they are. So they regulate basically against progress. And so far, they've fined every large American tech company, one way or the other, whether it's sort of alleged breaches of data or, tax or something like that. They really don't like technology companies and the progress that they bring with it. So here we are on the verge of Brexit. We've got a totally different attitude to Europe on this, incidentally. So, Brexit from that point of view, I don't think could come soon enough. It is really whether we grasp the opportunities of progress while Europe doesn't, or we just go, if you like, with Europe and turn our backs on progress. I mean, which would you want to do? I think it's quite simple. I think we go with progress.
Yeah. Well, progress, at least you have a shot. Trying to turn back the time, some type of atavistic notion of how good things used to be and how much better you were off, it just doesn't work. You can't live in the past. You have to move forward for better or for worse. But I'm not sure that all technology now is for the better. I mean, you see it with what Google, Facebook, Twitter do to censor views, but that's a whole different other aspect. But they want to use AI to censor viewpoints now.
Well, it is actually a very important point you raise here, Kerry, because there are two types of data. There is the general data, which is typically the sort of data that you put together to make a weather forecast or something like that. And then there is personal data. And it's personal data is where the problems arise. And I think that we can all agree that even though we don't necessarily own data in the sense that we own a house. Our personal data is personal to us, and it should not be used for things which we would not want it to be used for. So we are, I think, certainly in Europe, we're legislating for the control of personal data. I think they're probably being a bit heavy-handed. We will continue to do that, but we will try and do it in a more light way, I think, post-Brexit than the way the Europeans do. America, I guess, is the same, but I don't know where you are in terms of dealing with this legislative thing.
Oh, we're in the Stone Age.
Stone Age, okay. Well, and there is another aspect of this which I think we should take into account. When politicians complain about misuse of data and all the rest of it, usually they complain because they're on the wrong end of it. In other words, they're Democrats who haven't been elected, or, Republicans who haven't been elected. It's unfair because my opponent was using, people's personal data to, target their mail shots or whatever it was. Now, you could do this in the old-fashioned sense, knocking on doors. But the idea that you get data from Facebook or Google or whatever and deploy that for that purpose, this is suddenly very, very unfair. So I would say that, yes, there is a point on that because personal data should not be abused. But I think a lot of the complaints that we're getting from the politicians about abuse of data use, I suspect, is because they have been on the wrong end of it. Or alternatively, they don't like a world where they've got to adapt in order to get elected.
Yeah, well, it's it's really funny because you just see this all over the place where this data gets out, where the NSA or the GHQ, just is monitoring everything, and somehow that stuff gets out. Not a good thing, but that's the whole privacy issue. Your data should belong to you. Even Tim Cook at Apple said that Apple sells products to people, but that the Googles, the Facebooks, their product is their customer's data. And that's definitely cause for concern. Anyway, Alasdair, interesting conversation. Always great catching up with you. We go to goldmoney.com and look for your work there.
Yes, indeed, goldmoney.com, and you'll find that on the front page, there's a research tab. I write an insight article weekly, and that's published on Thursday, sort of, I suppose, lunchtime, late afternoon, EST. And I also do a market report on precious metals, which you'll find under the, I think it's Market Update tag. Yeah.
All right. The Market Update tab and...
Yeah, and that's on Fridays, by the way. Sure. That comes out on Fridays.
Great.
So something to read over the weekend.
All right. It definitely makes for interesting reading. Your articles are very insightful. Hey, just send us an email. Tell us what you think. KL@KerryLutz.com, Twitter feed @KerryLutz, and the Facebook page for now, Financial Survival Network. Alasdair, great catching up with you. You take care. We'll talk to you again real soon.
That's my pleasure.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.